So now let's move into the graded part of week 3 discussion. So what I'm going to do first is show you how to set up the starting code because it's different than what we've done before. So we're actually starting with a new set of files here. So I'll walk you through that. You'll do a commit and then I'll walk you through what you actually need to do with this starting code. And then we'll use AI to help you deepen, do an inquiry into that code. Because I'm guessing many of you, this is completely new. Some of you have some experience. I can already tell from the posts that have been done. Okay, so what we're going to do, and I have this link already up, this is to the week 3 folder, which by the way, if you ever can't find something, just know that if you go to our directory, our course repo, I have posted all the files right here that we use, okay? So in this case, I've given you a link here. Okay. So now I'm going to move over to VS Code because I typically work locally. I know last time I showed you on the overview video how I was doing it from CodeSpace, but typically I work locally. Now what I'm going to show you here is, and this is one of the things you can just know, is that I start building all of your repos locally. And so when I'm working in a specific repo, and you could do this if you're working locally, if you're working on CodeSpace, this is not an option because you have to open only one specific code space for that repo. So in this case, I'm just going to show you what I typically do for mine is I actually open a folder, I go to my base folder, and then I open the folder I'm going to work in. Okay, that's typically what I do just because now like my environment is kind of cleaner and I don't have a lot of other things to look at. So now I'm going to create a new folder. Okay, so in this case, when I'm going to create a week 3, it needs to go at the same level, meaning at this level. Now, how do I do that? When I click create folder, if I see it within week 2, that's not right. If I do week 3, just in lowercase, no spaces, they should be at the same level. Okay, now I'm going to come back over here. Right, and now we're going to grab from this link that I just showed you, and let's just do that. I'm going to grab the index.html. Okay, now I'm just going to do Control A, but you can just drag in whatever way it works for you. I'm going to copy it. Okay, I'm going to come over to here, and now I'm going to create a file. So we created folders, and now we create a file. So that helps when you type right or correctly. So I'm going to create a file, index.html. Remember, correctly, no spaces, lowercase. Now the only file that's ever generally uppercase is the README file, and the extension is always lowercase. But in general, going forward, I think all files should be lowercase. Okay, so now by the way, I'm going to also do this locally. I'm going to get rid of that because I don't want it in there. And I was talking about that in for the SQL, but clearly it's also related to here. So get rid of that interface because you won't be able to see it in an interview anyway. And so I'm going to paste this. So here we have 103 lines of HTML. Okay, and we're going to come back to just kind of looking at this in a minute, but now I'm going to create my other file. I'm going to call it, is called style.css. Okay, so let's come over here. Okay, style. Could be styles, Control A. You see it both ways. I call it style. And now in here, oh, now look what I did. And maybe this was by accident, but it is good to see. So when I created that, I accidentally created a folder. Now, how can I tell that I did that? It's got this little caret on it. So what I would do here is I would delete this. Okay, I haven't done a commit yet, so I'm fine. I come back here and go, oh, you know what? I made a mistake there. Style.css, and then I would paste in all that. Now in this CSS file, I've also gone through and had AI document this. And now there is a lot of code in both this HTML and the CSS. Okay, there's a lot to look at here. Responsiveness, there's selectors for almost everything that we're going to do in here. And so oftentimes when students, and even students that have taken HTML and CSS, this can be overwhelming. And this is where your dev tools gets really helpful. But let's go ahead and create that app.js, and I think I only had a console log in there. I'm fairly sure I did, and just to make my life a little easier, instead of code it because I don't have time. Okay, Now, I'm not going to go through the Git process with you or the workflow. This is your job. So in this case, you want to go ahead and do your Git workflow, okay? And your commit message should be W3, setup W3 done. Okay, so now you have the beginning files. Now you might wonder, why are we starting with this? Because if you were taking, as I mentioned in the overview video for this week, if you've taken HTML and CSS, this may be something you've created. But because this class is only focused on JavaScript, but we still need to give you an understanding, because what you're coding is actually using the structure that you're starting with, this HTML and this CSS. Okay? All right, so now let me go over with you, and this is just some context here, and then I'll show you what you need to put for this specific one, because there'll be two parts that you'll do here. First, I'm just going to have you spend some time, and I'm going to show you just how to kind of navigate this. So one thing I would do here, now that I have these 3 files up, I'd go ahead and hit my go live. I'd hit my W3 folder, and that renders my HTML. Remember, this is only local at this point. You will have pushed it to GitHub, but when you're doing development, you're only developing locally or on your code space, which is in a sense still local. Now, you've done this before, but right-click Inspect. Now, where we've been spending our time is over at sources, right? But in this case also, now we're going to add to your skill base of how to navigate elements and how to understand the CSS, okay? Now, this is a whole, like I said, a course to do this. So we're just going to do this relatively quickly, but DevTools can really help you, okay? So now notice what is happening here is that it shows, it may look like, well, these are the only files, but it's not true, and yours may look differently when you come in here. But you can use these little carrots here to drop this down and say, and this is nested, because HTML is a nested markup language. So within the head, there's a meta, there's a title, the title goes here, the script we know we've talked about, the link we've talked about, and that's the end of the head. And then we hit body. Okay, so within body, there's this is now more involved than what we've dealt with before. Okay, so now we have a main, which is something you haven't seen yet, but it's a semantic tag. And within main, we drop down, we have a heading 1. Now here's where your DevTools really becomes helpful. Okay, because notice, I can just, now when I'm up in this area, because this head section and above, now if I click here, it'll actually select the whole thing, but the head section is not part of what you look at, what's rendered, but in the body it is. So if I just have my body selected when I'm rolling over it, it is the entire rendered page, okay? And then over here is the CSS that is applied, that is, you know, what, and you could go look at, okay, this is CSS1. If I click in here, then it actually shows me, oh, this is the CSS in there, okay? But when you're looking at it, and let's just do another one, because that might not be the best example. So let's go back to elements this time and go to main. Okay, so in main, now what happens, okay, we have all the and this is where the CSS cascading style sheets. So in main, we still have all the selectors that show up. Now, selectors are just rules that say, okay, I want my family to be this font, I want my background color to be this, I want my actual color of the text to be this, I want my line height. So you can actually roll, and this is what I'll have you do for the first part of this, is just spend some time here, right? So go through a couple of these, and it's like, well, let me go back here before I move on, because now in my main, which is inside of my nested body, right, I pick up all of the body on the main, but I also have some additional CSS that's specific, and it's the cascade. So it's the, you know, it's the more specific to that specific element. So if I click here, right within here, now I have a background color. Notice this background color is different than this background color. Okay, and I'll show you how to play with this, because sometimes just seeing this, it's like, what does all this mean? It's helpful just to go in and play with it, and I'll show you how to do that. But again, I want you to, and let's just come back here because I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. So I want you to spend about 10 or 15 minutes exploring. Okay, in the Elements panel, click on the HTML, and I've just given you a couple, but there's a lot of different HTML in here. Now, you could also look at it here, okay, because we can see, okay, here's the body, but notice here, and you still have that same idea of the carrots to be able to collapse basically and expand things. They're not called carrots, but in this case, they are here as well. So I can see, okay, now look, almost everything in here, well, actually, pretty much everything you can see from line 11 to 100 is in main. So if I drop that down, so a similar thing here, but the benefits of DevTools is it actually not just shows you the HTML, it helps you start to see the CSS that is used to create what you're seeing on the page. Okay, so and this is where we can increase our speed, which you'll see in a minute, to at least have a basic understanding of this. But in general, this HTML is a form. Now, how do I know that? Okay, well, we have a container that's main. We have a heading here. Again, if I scroll, notice this, that it highlights that H1. If I come over here, I see some CSS applied from, first it takes the body, and then specifically it has an agent. Now, this agent thing is just the idea of the browser itself has some styles, and now our code, our user specific styles are here. Again, I could click in here and I could go here. You could look at that content to help a little better understanding, right? So first 5 to 10 minutes, I would definitely take more if you can, and then watch how the styles change. So what do I mean by that? Right, let's go out of here again. I'm going to come back to my elements, and just knowing how to navigate this will be helpful, right? Is that when I click on, let me go in one because you'll want to select something nested. I'll talk about that in a minute. Now everything is nested within main, and within main is a form, and this form is the majority of what we're going to be dealing with, although at the end of form we also have a section. Okay, but all of the inputs are what we're going to be using to in our JavaScript to get the user input. By the way, most of what you're doing on the web is actually using forms. So this is a real thing that you have interacted with that now you're going to understand at a deeper level. Okay, but let's just go into field set. So if I look at field set and let me show you the equivalent here. Here's my opening field set and my closing field set. So within this nested element, so field set is an element. Within an element, there's an element called legend. Now in this case, there's nothing within legend, but at the same level, I have a div. Okay, so if I just click on, if I click on the entire nested field set, right, that'd be 17 through 23. Okay, and if I came over here and when I'm looking at it in DevTools, I only see the CSS specifically for the field set. Okay, so I see it picks up some styles from the body. It has some user agent stuff that gets done by default, and then I have some CSS that was written custom for this, okay, for this specific selector. But now if I go down into legend, I see, right, I pick up body, so now I have some other ones. So understanding how this HTML is styled, which is what creates what you're looking at, is the example we're going to play with today. And this is where I jumped off a minute ago, I could start changing. I could come in here, I could change font heights, if the weight, right? And this and you might go, well, I don't know what those are. And that's why it's like you could roll over here and you could look at, okay, what does that mean? You could do a little playing around to figure that out. There's different font heights. This one's a little easier to see because if I took it off, right? And notice this is actually what I'm dealing with. If I checked off, then it no longer applies that. It goes back to the color that was on body, which is in this case a black. Okay, and that's where playing with this will help you start understanding. Okay, so spend some time. Then in your discussion, you're going to do 2 of these posts. First, reply with on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being completely new, 10 being very comfortable, right? What's your current understanding of the HTML and CSS? And give us a brief description, at least a sentence or 2 here, right? I'm completely new, but here's what I did get from spending this little bit of time. Okay, so now we're going to take that. So now you reply. So you create a heading here, right? Create a heading here, right? Let's see. Again, make up a heading. Use one like maybe a heading 4, like my first heading. Don't use my first heading. And then write. Okay, that part of it. Okay, so now we're actually going to take what we've been introduced to, and now we're going to dig a little deeper. Okay, so now this is worth, so it's 40 points total for this first part. I'll look at your commits, make sure you did, once you do your commits, do your git push so I can see it, right? And then I'll look at your post here to grade that 40 points. So now for the next 40 points, you're going to get, and we're going to use Gen AI to dig deeper. So now we're going to choose a specific section of the code to investigate. Now each student needs to choose a different HTML element tag. Now they're sometimes called elements, sometimes called tags, but briefly scan the classmates post to select something different. Okay, so now that gets a little interesting here because maybe somebody selected that whole field set and they're going to look at it. And maybe what you did was you selected only the div, right? So maybe you selected that. And let's actually go look at this because in this case, let's say somebody selected all that. So they're going to look at this whole thing, but you were like, you know what? Maybe I'll go down and select just the div here. You could do that. What you'd want to know is the line numbers. Okay, so let's go back. Okay, so select, right? So select a block, and this is what I was talking about before, not just a single line. So you need to have at least something nested within there. Okay, so that's what I was just showing you. Now start your reply to tell us which lines you're going to use, etc. 20 to 23. Right, this is a repeat of what I set up here. It's nested, right? Now you can post right here, right? HTML and CSS I will review. Again, make up a heading, right? I'll be looking at lines, what? I'm going to just say through 10 in the HTML. And then I can go ahead and hit a post. So if people are working on it, you can see, hey, somebody's already looking at that, okay? All right, so we do that, and now we're actually going to use a prompt, okay? So we're going to use a prompt here that I've given you. I've played with this prompt today, and I think this should work. It'll be interesting to see, is you'll end up copying this into your favorite tool, okay? And let's just walk through one, okay? So in this case, first, I'm going to use ChatGPT. I'm going to paste in, oh, didn't copy it. Let me go back and grab that, copy this, okay, because this is formatted to be able to easily, I think we did this before, right? So now in here, before you hit your enter, you're going to grab whatever your HTML block was. So I'm actually going to go down to a different one. Let me go down to one that may not get selected. Oh, this one, okay. I'm going to say, I'm going to do lines 88. So in my post, I would have said 88 through 96. That would be my post. And now in here, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to say, here's my HTML. And now I'm going to go over. So first you grab your HTML out of your VS Code. And now I'm going to go down and find that in here. I'm going to go down. I'm going to say, okay, did I just select the div? Yeah, I just selected the div. I'm going to grab this, right? And now I'm going to grab, oh, okay, I'm going to grab all this for what the CSS is, okay? Now, remember, as you drill down, that CSS is changing, which is part of what you want to start understanding. Okay, back at the prompt. Now here, for that element. Okay, so now that you've given it that, right, this is going to give you some content, right? This applies to the exact tag. This is because, right, and it'll give you some, and here's where, right, you are going to read this, do your best to understand it, right, because it'll also talk about, and I didn't even mention this, let's actually go back here to the div to kind of see this, is why are some of these lighter colored? Why are some of these out, right? Why are they completely striked out? And the prompt will help you understand that, right? What's it mean that it's dimmed out, right? Good. And then what you might say is, what is a div, right? So it'll give you that. So it'll give you that understanding, right? Good, 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 right? So this is where you come at this at different places, right? And then you could go, okay, what does it mean for mine that I have a margin of 40? Okay, and this is where reading and interacting with this prompt should increase your just beginning knowledge of this. Okay, now you could also tell it here, like if it gives you all this and you'd be like, I need a more basic understanding, you could say that, right? You could say, give me a more basic understanding of the HTML here used here. Okay. Again, the great thing about Gen AI is it meets you where you're at. Okay. And so look at this, breaks it down. Okay. But again, this is where you get to interact here. Okay. Going back here. So spend some time here, right? Again, I say 15 minutes, but give it as much time as you can. Okay, to understand why the styles. Now you also want to understand the HTML, but why are the styles look like they do? Okay, so now in your reply now, so this is the 40 points. Okay, in your reply, write your understanding of the HTML and CSS. Now now if you use AI to help you, write your own understanding, and then help AI to help you clean it up. Okay, again, there's no need to post your entire chat session here. Like I've said before, you can provide us a link if you want to. But the point of this is really for you to increase your understanding. Okay, all right, so that's what you'll do. Now the last 20 points is for you to reply to somebody, right? So find a classmate that hasn't had a reply yet, make one substantive post, right? So read what they wrote, because you reading their post helps you understand. Okay, so I know this one's different. We're starting off with a starting code that we're going to be adding to the rest of the semester. So having a good understanding, or at least a beginning understanding here. And this is, again, where you all come at this at different stages. Be okay with wherever you're at. Be willing to spend some time to increase it. Okay, and then write something that will help your classmates, right? Maybe something you've found in this process was more helpful. Maybe something I'll consider changing in the future. All right, that's it, and I'll talk to you later.